Ladies and gentlemen, industry guests, friends, speakers, embassies, everybody in this industry, welcome for being here with us today at HORTI Asia's Digital Talks. Thank you for tuning in. I believe I'm the only one wearing a tie sitting behind the screen. I hope you're much more in a relaxed setting. My name is Manuel Madani, former leader of HORTI Asia, and today I'm working with Priva Horticulture. I'll be your host for today and navigating you through a very interesting program. Today is a very important day because we have united one of the most progressive countries in medical cannabis, and we want to build this bridge of expertise and experience to the Thai industry. Accumulated, it goes over 30 years. We're going to share successes, but also our failures on how to become better and more progressive in the medical cannabis industry. It's so important that from today, we'll also be able to professionalize the Thai industry from the first instant to catch up on what's going on in the rest of the world, in Canada, in Israel, Netherlands, and many markets opening up. We believe with today's best practices, we can actually elevate that level or create a better understanding to where this industry is going to. In the end of the game, it's very important, as you can see nowadays in the market, is where is this heading to? Are we creating an oversupply, or can we actually export to other countries? And where is that level? So we hope we can inspire many entrepreneurs to become exporters and also engage on a global level of connections and building relationships and stimulating future trade. The industry has opened up in Thailand, and many have calling it the green rush. People are constructing, and leadership, you could say, is a little bit behind, and much is unknown. The outcome of this hopefully gives you better tools, and the key subjects that we're going to address today is going to have effect on the full value chain, from upstream to downstream. From Canada, we have one of the world's leading companies with us today that has done great projects, state-of-the-art, with over decades of experiences. We're going to discuss good practices, manufacturing, good flows, and maybe some degrees you could refer to as credentials of good quality. Then we move to the Netherlands, where we're going to talk about consistent climate control, on how you can optimize plant growth and ensure that quality to be medical grade or for the food industry. Eventually, and for some of you, maybe even more important, how do I reach that export level? How can I export to the EU in the future? And that's being presented from a great speaker we have today from Israel. Without further ado, I would like to dive into our program. So the first speaker you'll have is called Joel Fuzat. He's the VP of Innovation of Aurora Larssen's projects, based out of Canada, and he's calling in at very late stage, so to which our big respect. Followed by John van der Wilk, the VP of Horticulture of Priva, based in the Netherlands, with over 35 years of experience on indoor growing. And then our third speaker is Eshel Grinberg. He's based in Israel. He was one of the first initiators of cannabis farm in the US, and he's leading a lot of processes and business development to export great cannabis products. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome one of the night walkers, if I would say, Mr. Joel Fuzat.
Thank you for that introduction, Manuel.
You're welcome. I hope you're feeling well and you had some coffee, and we're excited to learn more from you on good manufacturing practices.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk today. Could we have the first slide, please? And the next slide. Okay. Hello to everyone. I'd like to thank each of you for taking the time today to listen to my presentation. So as I look across the world at the number of emergent markets for medical cannabis, it really brings great hope to my heart. Many people have benefited greatly from medical cannabis, enough so that, as we all know, enlightened governments and regulatory authorities have permitted the cultivation of either THC and CBD, or in Thailand's case, CBD only. The focus of my discussion is not so-called recreational cannabis use or adult use. Instead, it is strictly on the production of CBD for medical and health benefits. Most of us have taken or will take at least one prescription drug in our lifetime. In fact, in the United States alone, there are over 66 million people today taking prescription medication. All of those drugs will have been manufactured according to the principles of GMP, or good manufacturing practices. Following GMP for the manufacture of any drug is absolutely critical, and it becomes even more important given the impact on individual health and society as a whole if strict manufacturing practices are not adhered to. So GMP as a concept can seem very complicated. It becomes even more complicated because, with consideration to agricultural crops, it is often paired with another regulatory concept known as GACP, or Good Agricultural Collection Practices. The aim of GMP and GACP is to consistently produce high quality medicines that achieve international safety standards. 5 elements of GMP are people, premises, processes, products, and procedures. If all 5 elements are correctly executed, the 6th P follows, and that is profit. Today, my focus is on premises, processes, and products. In many new markets, CBD is emerging as a molecule of interest. It provides for and promises numerous health benefits, enough so that the global CBD market is estimated in the billions of dollars, with no clearly understood limit on what that opportunity is. Seeing opportunity, the production of low-cost outdoor-grown hemp for CBD began to flourish in the United States a few years ago. However, the production of outdoor-grown hemp for CBD comes with quite a few challenges, which greatly limit economic opportunity for producers. First, hemp unfortunately naturally produces THC, and as THC is a highly controlled substance, many countries, if they permit CBD production or sales, put difficult to achieve limits on total THC content, which is typically not more than 0.3%, or possibly as high as 1% or less in some cases. Unfortunately, the same factors which make hemp a low-cost crop when field grown, such as sunlight, also contribute to an increase of THC production through the impact of UVB radiation. This means there is always extra concern about THC content in areas with high UV radiation. Too much, and the crop may have to be discarded or refined into less valuable CBD isolate. Further, issues of purity become of concern given the nature of how hemp feeds. Hemp loves fertilizer and will deplete soil quickly. Unfortunately, hemp also naturally uptakes multiple toxic substances from the soil, including pesticides, fungicides, and heavy metals. Going even further, general environmental factors like weather, fire, smog, smoke, and pollution can either directly impact the expression of cannabinoids or contaminate the plant directly and entirely. Next slide, please. Because it is arguably the largest market for CBD in the world, we must look to the United States for lessons learned for those of us in emergent markets. As of December 2020, the US CBD market from hemp faced several challenges. All of these have led from what was once a boom with seemingly no limit for producers to a greatly restrained market. Harvesting massive volumes of biomass has led to contamination issues, forcing many producers to create less valuable isolate. Research indicates that there is some medical benefit from isolate, but this same research indicates whole plant-derived CBD extract can provide more therapeutic benefit with fewer side effects. Even further, as certain Israeli physicians have observed through studies, changes in conditions to a crop such as cannabis or hemp can directly result in changes to the therapeutic outcome of a treatment plan. Or, said another way, the same plant grown under varying conditions can sometimes be effective or sometimes not be effective. All of this sounds very complicated and troublesome, given that the whole purpose of CBD is to simply provide the same promise that other medicines can deliver. But fortunately, there are solutions and alternatives to the unpredictable nature of outdoor production. Next slide, please. Indoor production, or controlled environment agriculture, is key to the successful production of many, many crops, both food and medicines, and especially CBD producing cannabis varietals. It provides the correct premises for GAC production and the correct processes for GMP manufacturing steps leading to the correct products. CEA provides for the optimal climate, which equates to consistent, predictable cannabinoid expression that is inherently contamination-free, along with reduced disease pressure. Of course, when protected from the elements, indoor crops can be produced year-round in any climate, and providing for a consistent number of milligrams of CBD per gram of biomass per square meter per year. The greatest risks to production, such as catastrophic failure due to weather, insects, or even smoke from fires, become almost negligible, providing for industrial-like manufacturing considerations, including and especially scalability. Next slide, please. In looking at other countries where cannabinoids such as THC and CBD are regulated, we find a wealth of knowledge available for those of us who are in countries like Thailand, where there is fresh market opportunity. In 2016, Canada initiated a world first, which was to permit the production of marijuana for medical purposes, despite international sanctions on cannabinoids like THC and CBD. However, unlike the United States, where cannabis is legally produced for medicinal and recreational use in many individual states, Canada chose to enforce strict standards of production on cannabis for licensed producers. Now, initially, the regulations were not necessarily clear for Health Canada as well, and especially not to producers. But over time, Health Canada, which, by the way, is the agency responsible for overseeing the health and safety of Canadians by regulating drugs, food, and others. So Health Canada began finding clarity in how to fully regulate cannabis and make its various molecules of interest safe for human consumption. This standard is actually a combination of two concepts: good agricultural collection practices and good manufacturing practices. GACP concepts exist whenever the growth of a plant has been initiated and follows the plant all the way through its life cycle up until harvest. Sometimes, as we look to the world to understand cannabis production, we hear the phrase EU GMP. This is a standard which currently permits Canadian producers to export products into the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries. So let me just take a moment to expand on GACP and GMP. Could we have the next slide, please? So what is EU GACP and GMP? It follows the European Medicines Agency guideline on good agricultural and collection practices for starting materials of herbal origin. GACP helps to identify the critical production steps necessary to ensure good quality. To ensure consumer safety, substances must be produced hygienically, handled in a way that does not adversely affect the substance during collection, cultivation, processing, or storage. For example, in order to ensure appropriate and consistent quality of cannabis, it is necessary to establish good agricultural and collection practices for herbal starting materials. The concept of good manufacturing practices for the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storage of APIs, or active pharmaceutical ingredients, also applies to herbal substances like cannabis. In the case of herbal preparations, the production and primary processing of cannabis has a direct influence on the quality of the API. GMP areas are a part of a sterile environment where various manufacturing steps take place, such as the bottling of dried flower, oil, and other extracted products. Next slide. So here we see GACP on the left. To simply state it, any plant which is alive, has roots, and is growing in a media is GACP. This includes the moment a seed is germinated all the way up until a flower is ready to be harvested. And then the word that we use for trimming is rendering, where we separate the flowers from the leaves, the stalks, and the stems. That becomes GMP. So the area on the left is a standard climate zone in a greenhouse. The area on the right has a special HVAC, room pressurization, and is completely separated from the GACP areas. Next slide, please. This slide is an example of a functional GMP room and process, which is built into an EU GMP compliant medical cannabis facility located in Canada. So the premises, or in this case, the room of a GMP facility should incorporate the following. First, sufficient space, separation of incoming material and outgoing material. It is also important to make sure that operations are segregated. For instance, the quality control lab, warehouse, packaging, and labeling rooms should not be in the same area, such as the boiler room or other production areas. Second, clean and orderly conditions. Facility designs must allow for there to be logical flow of materials and personnel throughout the building. They should be well lit, and areas should have restricted access to authorized personnel only, like production areas. Example, some production areas could be quarantined with barriers, and only those with access or permission are able to enter. It's also important that people with the right training on the manufacturing process and safety are only in these areas, with other personnel being limited to their specialized areas of the facility. Third, effective cleaning. The building should be made of materials with easy, seamless, cleanable surfaces for all ceilings, walls, and floors. Extraneous materials should not be used in areas where there will be products. For example, materials that shed, oils, wood, cardboard, and other type materials. Temperature and humidity control. Having proper HVAC systems in place is required. Temperature and humidity controls must be in place where it is required to safeguard sensitive materials. For example, drying rooms require specific temperature and humidity controls to ensure the product is dried properly, does not generate mold, and is free from particulate matter that can impact the integrity of the finished product. I saw some comments. This presentation will be available to be shared afterwards, including my speech. Key aspects of GACP, in particular, are batch and lot traceability. Batch and lot traceability are necessary for purposes of recall, should this event ever need to happen. Batch and lot traceability also track critical inputs into a plant, such as fertilizer and approved pesticides. Upstream from the application of fertilizers and inputs, GMP and GACP provide for systems which de-risk production, such as the process of selecting safe and approved vendors who can provide consistent quality inputs over time, like nutrients and pesticides. The systems of GMP come into practice the moment a plant is harvested, as I had mentioned, and the individual flowers begin to become separated from stalks, stems, and leaves. Here is where facility design must especially incorporate correct room design, including features, again, such as cleanability and room pressurization. Maintenance systems must be in place, which keep critical equipment, such as HVAC units functional, while providing for regular filter changes that prevent contamination from being spread throughout the areas where various manufacturing processes take place. For example, the extraction of CBD and mixing into an oil, then bottling and labeling. Of course, everything which occurs must be documented in either written or digital form. And I understand this sounds like a tremendous amount of work, and it can be, especially when first beginning. However, the benefits of GMP manufacturing far outweigh the effort involved. Next slide. The value proposition to produce CBD-bearing cannabis at a greenhouse becomes quite clear when considering the issues with outdoor production versus the promise of controlled environment production. A primary consideration is that cannabis crops produced indoors permit a full plant extract as the starting basis for any active pharmaceutical ingredient necessary for downstream processes, along with the opportunity to extract various other cannabinoids that are time sensitive in the growth cycle, for instance, CBG being just one example. Proper crop scheduling permits timely harvest cycles and volumes, thus leading to predictability in the supply chain. With the added benefit of GMP practices, with documentation being just one, continuous improvement, or sometimes called continual improvement, permits the ongoing incremental improvement of processes through small changes and sometimes breakthrough improvements. With this opportunity, agriculture enters the realm of industrial scale manufacturing. And finally, it is my belief that the production of medicine requires an environment composed of practices that allows for the consistent manufacturing in conjunction with high standards. And let me just provide you with one example. that speaks to the true promise of medical cannabis, and that is Epidiolex from GW Pharma. This is really the only US FDA permitted CBD drug currently available at the market. There are a lot of CBD drugs for sale in various states today, but Epidiolex is the only one that can be effectively prescribed by physicians. And why was this drug approved? Because it was produced under GMP considerations and therefore familiar to regulatory authorities charged with protecting public health. And this permits physicians to safely prescribe this drug to patients in expectation of predictable outcomes. Patients being prescribed such medicine can be made clearly aware of risks and rewards due to pharmacokinetic studies, which provides confidence while knowing that a continuous supply of the medicine is available. Last slide. My conclusion, I believe Thailand has clear advantages in being early but not first to enter the marketplace for mass CBD production. Operating in an environment where regulators have clear access and guidance to comparable systems from international sources reduces the risk of the changing goalposts that the other markets experienced. Taking the lessons learned from the failed quality and repeatability and processing capacity experienced in North America, Thai producers have an enviable position of being able to target GACP and GMP production models from the planning and design stage. Avoidance of lost time and capital positions CBD producers to attain profitability and access to international pharmaceutical markets while focusing capital expenditures on growth and not repositioning and retooling. As higher quality research is being performed at a global level, the understanding of cannabis as a medicine continues to evolve, but has always maintained a consistent goal. Set doses of a CBD pharmaceutical generates a consistent and predictable result with minimal side effects. As with all industrial processes, the outputs rely on the consistency of the inputs. By taking control of the environment for plant growth and creating strict control procedures using controlled environment agriculture, producers will ensure their customers will receive a safe and credible active pharmaceutical ingredient in the global market. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You're very sharp for this early or middle of the night from New York, calling in to give this presentation. Before we head to John van der Wilk, who will be diving in more specifically in the climate control part of it. Joel, Canada has been open for a long time. One single question. What do you predict would be the single or first error for Thailand to be overcoming in the near future?
The lesson learned from Canada is do not overproduce and do not underspend on quality. If I won't name any names, but some of the early producers bought massive greenhouses. They didn't have sufficient climate control, and they experienced millions and millions of dollars in crop loss. This led to unpredictability in the supply chain, and it really frustrated consumers. And then it also additionally did not permit them for global export. It was only the certain producers who built purpose-built controlled environment facilities that were able to export to countries like the EU and others and enjoy that economic benefit.
Okay, so thanks, Joel. We'll head now towards John van der Wilk from Priva, who is an expert in building these facilities on indoor. Very important for the audience today, and I see questions appearing. Fill them in the Q&A box. We'll retrieve them in the end of the session. Both for all gentlemen, we'll have a panel discussion. John, hi, welcome.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you.
The bar is very high. Joel was performing very specifically, and I'm sure we have lots to learn from you. Whenever you're ready, please take us with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Joel, because it was really interesting, and I have to see if I can cope with your level, but I'm going to try to do so. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I hope that everybody can see it. So what I'm going to show you today is how we create an optimal growing conditions for medical cannabis crops. As Joel already mentioned, I think a lot of what he explained, I'm going to show you a little bit more in practice. We have done many projects over the world, also together with APLS. And I would like to bring you on a small journey to show you what has been done and where you need to pay attention and not to make mistakes in your installation, because if you want to have consistent quality, we need to be able to do that with the right equipment and also the right climate. Okay, 1 second. So if we're going to talk about the production stages, of course, we normally start with the mother plant, clone, veg, flower, and then the whole process, exactly what Joel explained. But what do we need for optimal growing conditions? It all has to do with, we can have the ideal growth recipe only when the installation is correct. So you have to deal with lighting, with the growth system, the irrigation, the climate conditions, temperature, CO2, humidity. And I'm going to show you the examples of where we are today. If you see the climate conditions, this is just one page. And it starts from the germination till drying and curing and the whole process. As you can already see that light, temperature, humidity will differ from, let's say, seedling up to the late flowering zones. And one particular thing is really important and different than growing other crops is the humidity level. Humidity level is really critical to get a consistent quality. And what we see in the world is many installations where they didn't pay attention and they thought, okay, we are going to do the same as we do in the normal vegetable industry, and they made quite a lot of mistakes with the installation, ending up with replacing the installation and getting a lot of extra cost. So I will explain you a little bit later about the installations, but this is really key. It all starts with the plant being in control. If that's for us the core. So how can we create the ideal climate? If we do not create the ideal climate, let's say we've got too high or too low temperatures, the photosynthesis will not be optimal, and you will have all sort of issues. So also with the humidity levels, as you can see, if the humidity levels are not good, you can ruin your crop. If the nutrients are not perfectly in balance, you will also have issues. So it all starts with preventing these issues, and therefore you need to have a proper installation. How does it work? And this is really key for every process or every project. What we first say is design, and then build, grow, and support. And the design stage is really critical. A company like APLS, they have done many years, let's say, the whole design stage, the build stage, up until that customers can start growing. You have to make sure that the design is good, also according to local climate conditions, because everywhere in the world it can be different, and then you need a different installation. Of course, building, select the right partners, create teamwork, and then you will be able to grow predictable and consistent quality year round. And of course, you need to make sure that you will have the right support for your growers and the management and maintenance. So this is key. And if you do these in the right order, you will probably are successful. As Joel also mentioned, greenhouses and indoors, they both have their, let's say, pros and cons. If you see a greenhouse, you have a little bit more influence from the outside, so a little bit more difficult to have consistency. At the other hand, you can use the outside conditions. Might save you a little bit on energy. If you go to indoors, it's more easy to have the consistency because the climate is not influenced by outside conditions. Of course, you need to work with artificial light. You always need to use HVAC equipment. cooling and heating. So there will be maybe a different CAPEX and an OPEX. They both are, possible and really good to control. It's key to have the right installation. These are just two examples. A big facility, Aurora Sky, also created by APLS, and the project, an indoor project. You see both quite large, different. So if we go and take a look at the installations, if we see the climate zones over the world, they're really different. So you can have hot and humid zones, you can have hot and dry zones, cold and dry, and cold and wet zones. And for each zone, you have to make sure you create the right installation. So how are the installations designed over the world? I will give you a few examples. But before that, I would like to show you one thing. That's the Mollier diagram. The Mollier diagram, in the presentation, I have more slides. You can have it. It's not in here because it would take too long. But the Mollier diagram is not something that Priva invented. It is really something that everybody in the industry is using. It is used to calculate what you need for cooling load, heating load, for dehumidification. Everything is attached to this Mollier diagram. And I will not explain all the details, but this is something we have also integrated in our control system, which is key. Otherwise, you're not able to control in a proper way. I will have two examples. And if you want to have more information, I can always share that later on. So if you take a look at the greenhouse, this is a particular greenhouse. And then you see, let's say the greenhouse, you've got outside conditions over here. You've got a mixing chamber. In the mixing chamber, you can have an evaporative pad wall. You can have a cooling block, a heating block, fans, air movement, and also an air outlet. This is a particular greenhouse. And just to give you an idea where they make mistakes, you see this evaporative pad wall over here. That is normally used in dry, hot climates, and you can grow perfectly. And cool your greenhouse, and you can grow tomatoes, vegetables, but you cannot grow cannabis. Why not? What's going to happen? If this is your greenhouse, temperature and humidity, 50% humidity, what is an evaporative pad wall doing? You will put water on it, it evaporates, it takes away the heat, and you've got cold air. But the downside is you will also increase the humidity level in your greenhouse, because that's the effect of an evaporative pad wall, meaning temperature perfect, humidity will kill your crop. So if you think of building a greenhouse with an evaporative pad wall in a region where it's hot and humid or hot and dry, it will not work for the cannabis. If you take an indoor facility, but also the greenhouses, we can equip them with a cooling block and a heating block. Outside air, recirculation air. If you're going to do it like this, then all of a sudden you are much more able with the cooling block to dehumidify, and with the heating block to bring it to the right temperature. And with this installation, you're always able to control your climate exactly as you want to have it. This is an example. So if you take a look at the Mollier diagram, this is the inside conditions. This is what you would like to have. And what are we going to do? First of all, we're going to cool with the cooling block, and we're going to the transpiration line, and here you have got condensation on your cooling block, so you take out humidity, but of course then it's too cold, and then what we do is heat it up again with the heating block. So the cooling block, the heating block, and the fan, you can always create the right climate. You can understand that this is going to cost you much more energy, because first of all you need to have a cooling machine for the electricity, and second of all you need to have heating to reheat. So this is more expensive, but much more accurate. And that's what you need in areas where it's or indoors or it is in a greenhouse in a hot, humid climate. Now about the control levels. We see in the world that there are just on-off controls. So they put in a dehumidifier, they will put in a heating, a cooling, it's all separate. And if it's separate, you will probably have, let's say, a set point that goes like this, meaning not perfect. And then you will see graphs like this. You do not reach your humidity levels, and your temperature is just a jigsaw, which you actually do not want to see. The other ones are that the computer is communicating to an HVAC piece of equipment that has its own controller. That seems to be something that could work, but imagine that the computer kicks on the assimilation light. This HVAC unit doesn't know anything about the HVAC light, so it will become too warm. The unit will see that and it will cool down. Then if we disconnect the lights, you will see a drop in temperature. So also, if you control with an external piece of equipment, it's not ideal. How you should do it is that you integrate everything into one system. So you need to have your climate, your water management, and your energy all in one system, and all connected to each other. How does it work? To give you an idea, if I want to do something with humidity, I need to check if my energy center can deliver me the cooling and the heating. If that's the case, I have to check with the HVAC equipment if it can do the work. So it needs to activate the pumps and the valves and the cooling and the heating block. Then, if that's in order, you might want to start the lights. And if you want to start the lights, you need to check in the energy center if we can connect to the grid, if there's a generator that supplies me electricity. If that's possible, next thing you want to do is activate more CO2, because you have the right temperature and humidity. You have the lights on, you want to have more CO2. And if you want to have more CO2 means, we're going to grow and the photosynthesis will start. And then actually we need to activate the irrigation. As you can see, if these are in separate controllers, it's going to be quite a job for a grower to get things done. So what we say, just put it in one system. If this is all in one system, there's no problem of controlling, but also it's modular and it's ready for the future. If you have all separate controllers, it's going to take you a day work. And with this, if you integrate it, it's just, putting it into operation and it works. Having said this, you can have these graphs. So temperature and humidity are completely in balance. And then we can do that for greenhouses and indoors. But what we also need to do is you need to connect to your energy center. You need to be able to control boilers, generators, cooling and hot buffers, and CO2 resources. These are just a few examples of energy centers we have done. Heat pumps, generators, CHPs, boilers, but also geothermal heat, all is possible. At the other hand, you also need to connect to the irrigation management. You need to know how much drain do I have? How much do I need to disinfect? Where are my irrigation units? And how can I have irrigation? What is really key is that if you design irrigation with day storage tanks, it's more forgiving, because if there's something wrong with your irrigation equipment, you will have water for a day. We also see installations where they have direct irrigation into the greenhouse or the rooms without day storage tanks, which is fine, but then you need to make sure that you have redundancy on the irrigation equipment. If something goes wrong, there's no time and you need to act immediately. Also, you need to have multiple main lines, because if you do not have multiple main lines into your facility, you will have different recipes for the flour, lay flour, the veg. And if you have one main line, you will always have to flush, costing you a lot of fertilizer, which you have to throw away or have to reuse and clean. You also need to take care of your return water. We see in the world that we need to reuse all the water. It has to be sustainable. You're not allowed to throw away any water, what we see in the world. So we have installations where we have UV disinfection. We reuse all the water. And not to forget, you have to check your main water supply. Is it city water, well water, rainwater? It is very critical to check your water, because depending on your water, you might need pre-treatment to take out, let's say, elements that you do not want to have. This is just an example of an irrigation room with units and your A and B stockings and your UV installation. Here you can see reversed osmosis that takes away the natrium, sodium out of your water. This is just an example of one customer Actually, it is also a customer that we created together with APLS. So you see over here the day storage tanks with the different main lines going into all the different rooms. You will see here the return water, the UV installation, and you will see the clean water tanks. So in the end, you will have the clean water tanks and the fresh water, and that will be blended again in these units and reused into the same tanks. So this is a completely closed loop system. So if we have, let's say, everything together, then you will see, you will have a user interface with all the data, because as Joel already explained, it's very important to be compliant with the industry. So you have to collect all data, has to be stored safe and secure. That's all in the system. So if you've got an integrated system, it's the best way to go. But what I would like to end with is it's really critical that you select the right companies to help you with the design and also help you from A to Z, not to make any mistakes, because I've seen so many projects in the world where they spend a lot of money and in the end have to redo and do it over again. So as Joel mentioned, learning from the mistakes we have seen is critical, and we are really willing to help. And I hope that this presentation gives you a short overview. I can talk for a few hours, but I had to do it in 1/4 of an hour. So actually, this is my last slide, and I hope it was useful.
Thank you, John. It was very interesting, and it definitely kept the bar high. We will go to a very interesting presentation in a bit. Just one single question, very important, that comes from the origin of the Southeast Asia, which hasn't gotten always the attention from high-tech horticulture. Mm-hmm. High-tech horticulture went to America, Japan, China, and now it's flourishing. So we see, rather, if we look outside, a low-tech horticulture reinventing control systems, greenhouses. And though there are very great companies from France, for example, also operating in Thailand that can give great service. But what would happen if reinvented systems and reinvented greenhouses would be need to complying to Joel's GMP and GACC?
Well, I think, you know, what's really important, that if you're going to reinvent the wheel again, it's you're gonna have the same failures as everybody did in the world. And I think with the knowledge today from Canada, you know, from Israel, from other countries, I think, you know, that Thailand can really benefit of all the expertise that's already in place. So I would recommend just you know, select the right companies to do the work with, because actually everything is already invented. Everybody knows how to create the best total cost of ownership. And I would really say, and that's what Joel also mentioned, the real benefit of Thailand is that, you know, the market is there, the knowledge is there, it's just a combination of the two. And I would really recommend make use of that instead of starting from scratch. That would take too long, cost too much.
Okay, thanks, John. We're heading over quickly to Eshel Grinberg, and Eshel is based in Israel, working for Tikun, Olam, Cannbit, and Israel has extensive. Eshel has extensive experience in cannabis production, also in the US, and he's going to share with us on how to meet, for example, the EU standards and export standards if Thailand were eventually to export products. Eshel, thank you. Are you with us?
I'm with us. Thank you very much, Manuel, for introducing myself. Shalom, friends. I'm humbled after hearing Joel and John speak. So I will attempt to give a presentation of how to create the right infrastructure in order to meet export into a global scene. So what we have here. So what we have here is our presentation, in which I will, in the course of a few 10-15 minutes, explain a bit about our journey. As Manuel said, we are here to learn from both successes and failures. And after we have been working for 15 years in the industry, we'll share that the first thing, in order to understand how to enter the countries with a medical grade product, is to understand what is the need. And the need is in the question itself. It is a medical grade product. If we want to start talking about medical marijuana head to head with any other type of drug, we need to understand what that consists of. So Joel and John have talked about some of what I call the pillars for a medical product, and I will share a bit about more of that. But what we need is we need a product that is per indication. So in the same way that we would take paracetamol to relieve a fever or for support of pain, we would take a specific product, a specific full spectrum product, be it in flour or in oil for a specific condition. And that is what we have established is one of the needs, the biggest needs right now in the industry. So what we need is a specific product tailored for a specific condition in a very high level of expertise. And I will explain how we do that. So the first step is we set up the interface. This Joel and John have spoken about beautifully. We call it EU GMP and monograph. The EU GMP, as Joel and John have explained, is really the base in order to be very, very compliant and to have repeatability and to have scalability that is fully monitored. So as we would have in any pharma company, you will be able to have full traceability of your product. So when we create an infrastructure that consists of GACP, a good agricole and collection procedure, be it either high-tech greenhouses or full indoor, we have that with the GACP. The next stage, of course, would be the post-harvest. The post-harvest is a very important part in which we take apart the flower, we start drying it, we cure it, and we make sure that the potency of the flower, which is going to be either our end product or a product within our finished oils, depositories, or pills, happens in this phase. All of this needs to be with full traceability and checked consistently on the highest level. I won't go to all the specifics because I think my colleagues have done that very well. The first phase is going to be the production, the actual manufacturing facility. Here we have said, I have written down EU GMP. The reason for that is very simple. The EU GMP right now is the leading standard if we want to enter everywhere. So as a global market, we're seeing Israel as a very large market. We're seeing the Latin and Central Americas open up, and we're seeing mainly Europe open up. So in order to conform to those standards, we build everything based on that level of expertise. Now, the fourth thing we are going to do, and this is very important that I've written here, is the monograph. For any of you who have already started their journey into export, I've maybe heard this term monograph, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. So the monograph is based on the German pharmacopoeia standard, which means basically that your finished product needs to be the same with no more than 10% variant every single time. Now I can say when we have an EU GMP facility creating oils, for example, from a full spectrum of the plant, this is something that is very attainable and can be done. And that way our patients can know that every single time they are going to be getting almost the exact same product and they will get the same relief. We need to remember that behind the product, there is a suffering or sick individual that might have be on the autism spectrum, they might have be epileptic, they might have various cancers, so they have different needs. So they need their medicine to be consistent. And this can be done not easily, but precisely when we create full spectrum oils. This can be done either through CO2 extraction, ethanol, and there's different other varieties that we can explain about what is best for which situation. So that is with respect to the monograph. Where this becomes slightly more difficult, and I say slightly, almost jokingly, but much more difficult, is when we have a finished flower. So as you know, an agricultural crop is not 100% consistent. And many times one tomato is going to be more than 90% more than, 10% different from another tomato. The same is true with cannabis flower. So by setting up a very high quality of GACP, whether it be indoor or very, very, very strict greenhouse, we can get to the point of having a very uniform flower, of a uniform product that is able to meet the demand and the need of the global market. Now, so this would be the first pillar that we've discussed upon quite heavily in this webinar. The second thing that we pointed out in Tikun Olam Cannbit is to create and find the right strain. So as I've said, we have specific strains that will fit and be tailor-fitted and tailor-made to a specific condition. One strain will not be the all-purpose strain for every single condition and every disease. And so we need to find those, proper genetics. We need to either buy them or create them themselves. And after we have those strains, which are high yielding, I would say, which are not prone to diseases, which are easy to grow and not subtle to any discrete changes, which are uniform, and which have the right full spectrum analysis of both cannabinoids and terpenes, then we have our second building block. We have our second pillar. And armed with the right GACP, GMP facility and the right genetics, we can actually move to a third phase, which I've not put here in our slide, but that is research. And it's here I've called it collect the data. So what we have done in Tikun Olam Cannbit over the last 15 years, we've done clinical trials. We've done over 35 clinical trials, 18 of which we have already published. And I highly, highly, highly advise for anyone who wants to step into the global field of medical cannabis to do the same. If we are going to go head to head with leading pharma companies, that spend absolutely hundreds of millions of dollars to create the perfect product with as little side effects as possible for the patients, we need to be able to show that we can do something similar, if not the same or better. And this is done through clinical trials, through double-blind placebo-controlled trials. It can be done also with simpler methods that are effective, but I would say not as effective, which is collecting the data from the patients. So if we do a follow-up with our patients, we give them a certain oil for a certain condition, and we ask them during 6 months, every month, how is your pain now? How is your quality of life? What changed here? And we provide them with these questionnaires. We now have our third pillar. We have real evidence-based data that can, along with our GMP, along with our strain, and now we finally have something to really prove that what we are saying is what it is. So those are the three pillars. And then the fourth pillar is really about telling the story. So if we want, and this is something that I can say is an art and is tricky, and for any company that wants to really be able to do it, and this is a great opportunity right now for Thailand, obviously, because we are in the stages of our industry where we've done a lot of groundbreaking work. As John stated, there have been a lot of companies in Israel, in Holland, in Canada that have done a lot of studies. They've perfected how to grow, how to create a factory, how to do studies, which cannabinoids and which terpenes are correct for which conditions. So based on that knowledge, we need to take our four pillars and be able to come and enter a new country, such as Germany, and tell the doctors, I have this product, it is fabulous. I will tell you why it's fabulous, because A, it does this and that, B, it does this and that, and C, it doesn't this and that. And those this and that's that I mentioned are things around, let's say, I will give an example that we have from Parkinson's that we have done. We've seen that with a specific use of oil, Parkinson's patients get 70% less tremors, and their overall quality of life has gone up from average of 4.5 to 8. So if we can show that, and we can show either the patient data that we've filed together or the clinical data, and we can show our GMP standard, which is a world recognized stamp for high quality, we can go to a country and the doctors will feel confident that this is really a medical product. This isn't the recreational hype that has been going on, in the world for the last 2 decades. But this is something that is safe, it is efficient, it is equivalent, if not better, to what they can prescribe right now their patients. And so they will have all the security to buy the finished product. So I wish to thank you on behalf of Tikun Olam, on behalf of myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Eshel Grinberg, for a very also touching presentation. I think you brought us with us to the human side of it, of talking to pharmaceuticals. We were talking about how to get the standards right, what are the best practices in Canada. Then we were into John's presentation of technical feasibility and how to control the climate and build your facility. And then we actually go to a session with you where we talk about diseases, becoming better with data, cooperate with pharmaceuticals to prove cases. But I also sense something that you're saying we need to educate also other industries, other countries that might be opening up with this professional setup. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely, Manuel. So really the most important thing, I think really John, Joel have also touched upon, and I wanted to strengthen that, that emphasis. There's been a lot of knowledge accumulated over the past years, and in order for a country like Thailand to utilize that knowledge, we need to be able how to tell the story correctly. We need to base ourselves off professionals that have done it. Otherwise, what can happen and has happened to many companies, they will spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure, and in the end, they will not have much to show for it. So this goes with the agriculture, it goes with the science, it goes with the research, and in the end, this is what needs to be prescribed by doctors. So there's people in the end of this that need to really feel confident that they are buying a quality product.
Yeah, that explains all the why, big core question, what we are doing to not be passive, but just be progressive and active and educate future industries. Eshel, do you expect also future countries in Southeast Asia that will be looking at Thailand specifically? Can you disclose anything about that? Or
I know that Thailand has set to itself this year to provide 1 million units of CBD oil. I know that Malaysia has shown interest, and really the neighboring countries are waiting to see what Thailand is going to be. So I think Thailand has the option to be one of those groundbreaking countries within Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Eshel. A great presentation, and happy to have you here. I would like to welcome all the speakers back. We're going to a panel discussion. Joel, thank you. You were with us a while ago. I hope you didn't fall asleep. Yes, there you go. Okay. Yes, it's very late, and I thank you for staying with us. John, thank you. You're still here with us, and Eshel just gave a presentation. Gentlemen, we're heading to the Q&A session. I see the figures are getting up. For any of you who would like to receive a presentation or be in contact with Joel, Eshel, or John, send me a message. I'll be happy to connect you by email and details. And that can be done afterwards, even if your question is not being answered. I would like to go, well, one of the first questions I think is more suitable to you, Joel. I will ask you the question. You see, like Miki Fuji, he asked about the GMP function as a proof to ensure its quality and prevent poor quality product to flow into the market. Do you have any plan of having a blockchain tech to introduce and secure this practice?
Yeah, I'll answer that in 2 parts. GMP is not an automatic solution. GMP is a system to be implemented. So a company can take on all of the GMP practices, but what's important to remember is it must happen at the operational level, at the facility level, and the individual level. GMP requires the company is built correctly from the ground up, and we call that a quality culture. So if you implement the practices, if the people do what they intend to say that's written down, and all of this is executed correctly, then yes, regulators and physicians will accept that product as proof of quality. And as we saw in Canada, companies who could not execute against GMP were limited to a regional market or simply were never Health Canada approved. Now, with respect to blockchain tech, I understand that it can provide benefits to trackability and traceability, but I am not seeing GMP companies implement it yet. I think it's a little bit early stages, and GMP provides for conservative, safe, traditional systems that function very nicely. In the future, blockchain may be part of keeping traceability and security of what's in a package there, but for now, I don't have any experience with actual operators using it.
Maybe in the future we will see more information. The next question will go to you, John. It's regarding a greenhouse structure, and the question is appearing also on your screen. Since you mentioned semi-closed interferes with humidity, what kind of greenhouse would be ideal for the tropical climates such as in Thailand? Conventional venlo, plastic, perhaps indoor. What is your recommendation?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, you always have to take different options into consideration, but in the climate where it's humid outside and it's warm, indoor facilities, of course, will eliminate all these factors. You can also use a greenhouse, because we have greenhouses in the world where we also have similar climate. But then what you really need to do is create, let's say, a cooling and a heating system, as I mentioned, so that will be mechanical cooling and heating. And so that will be HVAC equipment, but then in a way that it's done in a smart way, in a mixing chamber, in a corridor on the gable wall. So it's different than, let's say, indoor facilities. Then probably are mounted normally on top of, let's say, the building. With the greenhouse, they have, let's say, a mixing chamber on the gable wall, and there we install the air treatment, and that will be cooling and heating. And it would be also ideal to see where you can get your energy from, because we also have projects where we connect to power plants. They've got waste heat, and they have got waste steam. And with steam, we can convert steam in an absorption machine into cold water. That sounds strange, but that's what it is. So creating from hot water, we can create cold water using an absorption chiller. So I think it's crucial to see how you can make it feasible. So it is a more expensive installation than using an evaporative pad wall in a hot, dry climate. So the ideal greenhouse, it can be, of course, you can do it in plastic or glass or indoor. But indoor eliminates everything outside. If you use a greenhouse, you have to use mechanical cooling and heating. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John. And I also related to that question to what Eshel shared with us, that you need to be very accurate, and you cannot do the conventional horticulture practices with the tomato example, where you differ in quality, and that's not possible with a pharmaceutical product. I would want to go to one of the questions we received. This is purpose for Eshel. Could you address the 3 pillars in commercialization of a successful cannabis-based product?
Yes, of course. So the first one being the setup, infrastructure, GACP for the actual cultivation, GMP for the post-harvest, and GMP for the facility, for the manufacturing facility, whether it be extracts or if it's just packaging. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is the genetics. Each genetic should be tailor-made for a specific condition, and should be stable, should be competent, should be high quality, based on a full need of cannabinoids and terpene analysis based on the medical journals. And the third pillar is accumulating the data. Once you have pillar 1 and pillar 2, and you start using your products and selling your products, I would urge to accumulate as much data as possible through clinical trials and through patient database, so we can prove that what we have here is a high quality medical product.
Okay, thank you, Eshel. We're going to a question that's being shared from Mr. Kun Benjawan. For all of the gentlemen, please feel free to share. At present, do we have any formulas for controlling cannabis qualities?
Formulas, I think, you know, that, and maybe Joel can explain it a little bit better than I, but of course there are, let's say, ideal recipes for different strains. And these recipes, if you can follow that with your installation, you will have consistency. But maybe Joel, you can add to that.
Yeah, John, I think you're correct. It's really about creating a facility with the right controls that permits the right climate. I have to say, except for groups like Tikun Olam, there is not a huge amount of cannabis genetic material in the world that is very well characterized. So in these somewhat early stages of production, we must create a facility that has a little room on either side of, say, temperature or light or humidity. We have to observe, document, and use our cultivar that works best in those environments. In the future, I have no doubt that scientists will create genetics that can grow in a wide variety of parameters. So today, yes, we understand some cultivars, but you have to be able to access those cultivars to be able to execute a recipe against them. Flexibility.
Okay.
And maybe one thing to add is that with the new you know, process control, everything is connected to the cloud nowadays. As Eshel mentioned, you know, we have to collect the data, but we also can insert data. So if there are, let's say, seed companies that have the knowledge about a certain recipe or strategy, it is possible now to adapt that strategy into the control loop, and that is new. Which we are now doing already for the vegetable and the tomato and the lettuce industry. If there are seed companies that have that information, Joel, which we do not have for all the strains now, we can adapt that in the control loop, and then you have your recipe optimized. Yeah.
Okay, John, thank you for sharing. We're heading towards a closure of the session, but before we close it and make any announcements, of course, hopefully one day we'll meet in person. We can visit some nice projects, and we can also cooperate with fellow peers in Thailand and also maybe other countries in Southeast Asia, having people like Eshel from Israel and Joel from Canada here in Thailand. Any final closing remarks before we close this presentation? Final advisory or recommendations? Well, would you care to share anything?
Myself? What I'd like to share is keep an open mind and really take a look at what has and has not worked around the world. There is a lot of information there. It's not all in one area. And remember, it's a journey. When I started this in Canada, it was a continual process of evolution, and I'm still learning all of the time. That's key in these early stages of medical cannabis.
Thanks. John?
Well, I would like to add indeed that don't hesitate to ask all the questions that come up in your mind if you start with a process like this. So make sure that you ask the right questions, and also make sure that the companies that are going to connect to you can give you these answers, because everybody can sell you something, but it's much more important what are they going to bring to you, you know, how are they going to be an added value to your process, and not just a company that sells. I think, and it counts for, I think, for APLS, but also for you know, for Priva, and I think for Eshel too, that we see the industry as let's say creating partnerships and do the work together. and that's how we can progress. So I would say really be critical on your journey towards the high let's say the high-end industry. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, John. And now Eshel, who touched base very importantly on the why, what we are doing things. Eshel, what would you care to share as any final remarks?
I think my final remark would be, remember that we're creating a medicine for patients, for people. We're talking about something that is completely groundbreaking, to be completely honest. The pharma industry has been the same for tens and tens of years. And like John and like Joel have said, we're creating partnerships, and the medical cannabis industry is a large but small community. So please utilize the people that have done some work, that have the knowledge, so that together we can create really a superior product for people that really need it. Okay.
Wow, I've learned a lot, to be very honest, from all of you, and it was an impressive hour. We really, learned what's going on in Canada, in Israel, in the Netherlands with projects all over the world. We hope we can inspire fellow peers to, to not reinvent the wheel. And unfortunately, that has been done across the world for frequent times. And I hope we're still in time, and we're keen to progress on this discussion. If anybody wants to be in contact with Joel, John, or Eshel, send me a message, and any of the organizers a message, and a link is very easily connected. And hopefully we can really go to a specific, like Eshel shared, a better performing industry with data, and educate, inspire other industries in Southeast Asia to do the same. Herewith, I would like to thank everybody attending. It's been an absolute pleasure to be your host today. I have one small announcement for another session. Don't know whether it's very relevant here, but it is regarding Agritechnica, and this is a silage production session for dairy forage, so for foraging. Again, thank you very much for being here with us, and we look forward to start an interaction. With that being said, this is the end of the medical cannabis session, and we look forward to discussing more with you. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Shalom and peace be with you. Bye-bye.